I'm going to give you what I think are the best practices for really doing a policy that I can build quickly and I can feel confident. To do it, we're going to go through a few different concepts here. The automatic and manual policy building, the trusted and untrusted requests we'll do first. You do an exercise, and then by the end of the day, we're going to cover those three concepts of learning, staging, and enforcement. Very, very important when it comes to completing your policy. You don't want to be one of those SEs that puts your customer with an incomplete security policy and they're continuing to get attacked from this point forward. That's no good. So let's first off review what you actually just did in your last exercise. You were generating learning suggestions. That's exactly what you did. We have the suggestion list, and you started making requests of the website. That's what you did. And as you did that, you started getting suggestions for things like file types, the no extension file type. Now, in addition, we talked about a couple of other things we can create whitelists for. Not just file types, we can also create whitelists for URLs. So I can have the suggestion of the URL as well. And we continued that process of submitting requests either through clicking on links on the page or submitting the URL manually and hitting the enter key. But over time, we're building up the suggestion list of all these file types, how many times they were requested, URLs. Keeping in mind that it's also possible to be getting truly malicious requests as well. And those file types are going to end up in the suggestion list as well. Those URLs are going to end up in the suggestion list as well. Not all these suggestions are ones we actually want to add. We also can choose to add parameters. I want to create a parameter whitelist. So I might see some parameter names anytime somebody's interacted with one of my form fields, my forms. But sometimes the parameters are even harder to really identify because, again, who named these parameters? Whoever created the web page. And sometimes these parameter names don't mean anything to us. They're kind of confusing. So I've got this form here, and who can remind us a quick, easy way that I can identify what the name of those two parameters is? I can go to the source. I can even make it easier than that. When I just go to the source page, I have this long page. I got to find through it. I got to weed through it. We can also just, in most of our browsers, right-click right inside the field and choose to inspect, and that takes you right to the source code, right to the field in question, and I can see, one field is called online ID, one field is called passcode 1. Hey, look, that's the exact names I've just learned about. Those are valid. That's a way that I can identify valid parameters. So we're building up these lists. That's how we generate suggestions. Again, you just did that in your last exercise, but you only did it for file types. Now what we're going to do is we're going to go one step farther and we're going to talk about two different methods of policy building. We can do manual policy building and we can do automatic policy building. Manual policy building is actually a review of what you just did. Again, more review. Let's examine what you just did. You saw this list and you're like, I wonder which ones I should add to my policy. So as a reminder, all of these entries in the traffic learning page, they have a learning score that was generated by the policy builder. That's based on how many requests ASM received for that item from different users using different computers over a period of time. That's an important distinction. From different users, different computers over a period of time. The more times different users have requested an ASP file type, the higher the learning score for that particular entry is going to be. Very few people have requested that file type, therefore it has a very low learning score. And I'm going to use both that learning score and my own knowledge of the web application. Oh, and yes, those learning scores do go up over time. We can keep track of that. Now, the idea here is that when a learning entry has reached 100%, that's essentially the policy builder's way of telling you, hey, you know what? I think that's a good entry. I think you're going to want to add that to your positive security. In other words, no extension, ASP, those should be valid file types, which is what you saw in your last exercise. You saw some of those entries become 100% after you generated enough requests. So I can take a look at those, and in manual mode, as you just did in your last exercise, an administrator, somebody, has to go and select those learning entries and choose to accept them. Click on that blue button. Accept them into the policy, thus creating my positive security model. However, you don't have to wait till it hits 100%. You also did that in your exercise. You said, you know what? I'm pretty confident that PDF is a valid file type. I'm pretty confident that both of those URLs are valid. But the key here is that somebody has to manually add all those items to my positive security model, also known as my whitelists, my individual whitelists. Also, we talked about the fact that somebody should come through and potentially delete or ignore those other learning suggestions. As a reminder, if I choose to delete them, as soon as somebody requests php.ini again, it's going to add it here again, and it's going to add it there again. But it'll start back at the beginning of the learning score, back wherever it started initially. If I choose to delete those, they're gone for good. I will never see them in my suggestion list again, which is what I want to do when I'm confident that I do not want to add ini as a valid file type. Ignore it. I don't want to add php.ini as a valid URL. So again, this is really what you just did in your last exercise. You were using manual policy building. And that's because of how you built your policy to begin with. When you built your policy, you gave it a name, you gave it a type, rapid deployment, and selected the correct virtual server, and then you just clicked on create. You didn't do anything else. However, if you did come over here and you chose the advanced settings, and then you scroll down a little bit, you would see that we actually did have an option for the learning mode. By default, rapid deployment uses manual learning, which is why that's what you just had in your last exercise. But there's nothing stopping you from using rapid deployment and then changing it over to automatic. You could do that if you wanted. I've done it a few times when I create policies. So that is manual policy building. Now let's talk about automatic policy building. Automatic policy building begins in the same manner. We have file types maybe, we have URLs maybe, parameters. Again, this is just if we've chosen to include that as part of our security policy. Over time, we also still have malicious entries potentially in all of these. Over time, these scores are going to go up based on how many requests we're getting from all of our different users out there using the application over a period of time. Maybe a week later, they've gone up. Maybe a few weeks later, they've gone up even more. And eventually, as we just did in the last example, eventually some of these entries hit 100%. Now comes the difference. In automatic policy building, anytime any learning suggestion has hit 100%, the policy builder automatically adds it to the security policy. Automatically makes it part of the positive security. Because it feels very confident. It's at 100%. It is actually probably very likely that that's part of the security policy. And that continues as items continue to hit 100%. They'll all be added to the positive security model. Now, even when where in automatic policy building, Mr. Administrator can still come and manually add other entries themselves. And we still have these entries here that we haven't done anything with. We think they're malicious. Yeah, we're not sure. I'm not sure what to do at this point in time. Should I ignore them? Should I delete them? But in automatic policy building, the administrator should do something with them. Absolutely should do something with them. Here's the problem. If we sell this concept of automatic policy building incorrectly, it makes it sound like I can just turn it on and then I can go off for long lunches and early evenings and just never worry about it again. But that is not how we want to approach this. The administrator should be monitoring that learning list regularly and identifying those potential malicious entries, and here's why. So let's say we had just told the administrator to set it and forget it, they can walk away. Look at it, it's only got a low learning score. Hardly anybody requests that. So again, we've already added our legal stuff. Automatic policy building did it for us. We got a couple items that we think are malicious, but I'm not worried about it. Remember, if we ignore it, it takes it out of the list. If we delete it, it might come back in the list. That's a reminder. But now, time is going by. A couple of weeks, a couple of months. It's taking a long time because these are not requested by very many users. But if I don't do anything, eventually, those entries could hit 100%, and they could get added to my positive security model. And I now am allowing the use of .ini file requests and forceful browsing. That's why it's so important that we monitor this list. And I will remind you, as what I said earlier, if I'm not sure, I think it's malicious, but I'm not positive yet, then that's why I delete it. It's already up to 60%. Oh, I'm kind of worried about that. Delete it. If it's requested again, it comes back in the list, but it starts back at the low learning score. So it gives me some time to evaluate. But then once I know those are malicious, I want to ignore them, so they're gone, and I never have to worry about them coming in this list again, and I will never have to worry about them accidentally becoming part of my positive security. Okay? How do I do this, by the way? Yes, we should definitely make sure that they understand. And somebody needs to address that list. How do I create a security policy? Using automatic policy building? Well, I just showed you a couple of slides ago. You really could do it with rapid deployment if you wanted, and then just force it into automatic. But we could also pick one of our other template types. We could pick comprehensive or fundamental. Now, first off, what's the difference between these? Fundamental is going to add additional security options that are not included with rapid deployment. Don't ask me to name them all. You could probably find a document on Ask F5 that actually has everything it enables. Just know that fundamental enables more security by default than rapid deployment, and then comprehensive enables more security by default than fundamental. So if I know that I want to start off with the most security available, I would use comprehensive. But I'm probably still going to be adding even more, doing some additional tweaking. Regardless, if I select either one of those, and then I look at my advanced settings, you will see that they both use automatic policy building by default. Now I could do what I just said a few moments ago. I could actually use comprehensive or fundamental, but switch back to manual mode if I wanted to. Except right now, I can't because it's kind of grayed out. I can't select these. This is a little confusing. This would not be intuitive of what I'm about to share with you. The reason is this application language. When you use rapid deployment, it defaults the application language to a Unicode, I believe. It's just the Unicode, that's the way that the application language is referred to. There's a variety of those in here. When we use comprehensive or fundamental, it sets the application language to auto-detect. Now what that basically means is ASM, we're giving ASM the opportunity to figure out what the language is first. Is it Unicode? Maybe it's something else. But nothing else is going to happen with the policy. Nothing else is going to happen until ASM knows what the language is. Then it can start doing some of its other things. And for whatever reason, I'm not really sure why, you also can't change the learning mode until it knows what the language is. So here's all you have to do. Just do the same thing rapid deployment does. Change the language from auto-detect to Unicode. As long as I know that's what it is, that's what most applications are, and notice what happens now is these become enabled. So if I wanted, I could use comprehensive and still use manual mode. Or I could stay with the automatic mode. So that's how we created our security policy using automatic. So now we've covered one concept, manual mode versus automatic mode. Does anybody have questions yet on just that? So we're going to layer on these different concepts one at a time. The second concept for this lesson is using trusted requests versus untrusted requests for building your security policy. Let's explain. So I've got ASM, we've got inside of our data center, we've got outside of our data center. When I use trusted requests, whoever creates the security policy is going to designate, identify one or more IP addresses, and they can also use an IP range, a network address. This IP address or IP range identifies my trusted users, which more often than not are users inside the organization. Anybody else outside of these IP addresses are considered untrusted requests. In your last exercise, just based on what I just told you right now, in your last exercise, were you using trusted requests to generate your learning suggestions, or were you using untrusted requests? And you could just go off of a guess if you're not sure. I'm sorry?
Untrusted.
To answer the question, I will ask you another question. Did you ever designate any IP addresses as trusted? No, you did not. So if you didn't, then everything was untrusted. All we were using was untrusted requests. So you are correct. So whether I am using automatic or manual mode, that is irrelevant. Whether I'm using automatic or manual mode, I can build my security policy from these trusted users, because those are using IP addresses in that range, or from untrusted users, anybody else. They all can be used for building the security policy. The key, what's important, is knowing that the trusted users build the policy faster than the untrusted user requests. When I'm using trusted users to build my policy, it's going to build the policy faster for me. Keep that in mind. We'll keep going further with that. Let's take a look at how this works and why. So here's my security, my ASM. Here's my learning score from 0 to 100%. And I'm using untrusted requests, just like you did in your exercise, because we never designated any trusted requests. So as users are accessing my transfer.asp page, these are different users from different devices, over the course of the state, the country, who knows. After a certain number of these requests, we'll now see some learning entries for the ASP file type, the transfer.asp URL. It took a few requests to generate that, but you'll also notice it's very low. Both of those are at a 5% learning score right now. That number of unique requests needed to do that is configurable. I can make it 5 requests, I can make it 50 different unique requests to generate a learning score entry. The rule of thumb is that those learning scores go up much slower from untrusted requests. In addition, this user up here needs to wait. All of these users need to wait before requests from their workstations for that same file type and that same URL are going to affect the learning score again. This is why I'm saying that when I see a high learning score, that means those 2 entries were accessed by lots of different users with lots of different computers. That's important because here's what we don't want to have happen. And by the way, that amount of time that they have to wait is also configurable before their computer can generate. Now that doesn't mean they can't generate another learning score for HTML and another learning score for, login.php. They can do that as well. But these 2 entries, they won't affect again for a period of time. The reason we do that, this is very important, because we want to prevent this malicious user who's trying to access php.ini. We don't want them to just go sit there and refresh their browser, refresh, and watch the learning scores go up for that until it hits 100%. They can't do that because we've already recognized one request from that host. They have to wait 7 days before another request from them is going to affect the INI or the PHP INI suggestions. That's actually good for us. Here's another interesting fact. If they wait 7 days, it kind of negates their first request. So even if they wait for 7 days, the fact that they initially requested 7 days ago is kind of gone. It has to be accessed. php.ini must be requested from lots of different users in lots of different computers in a short window of time before we start looking at learning score creation and increase. So, when you're using untrusted requests only, it takes a long time, potentially can take a long time for us to see any learning score entries that hit 100%. Because they can go up, but they can also go back down if they haven't been accessed over a period of time. So you might see learning score going up, and they come back down, up and down, up and down. And this is why we get these queries from people. It's taking so long to build my security policy. Why? Because you're only using untrusted requests. Not only do I not have control over how many people are accessing my pages, I don't have control what pages they're accessing. I don't know. Are they accessing valid pages? Are they accessing malicious pages? I'm not even sure. I don't know who these people are. So what I want to do is I want to look at using trusted requests for building my policy. So now my administrator has designated 3 IP addresses. These are my 3 app builders right here. These 3 users I have designated to build my security policy. Everybody else can keep using it. You guys can use my web page, my website, but you're going to be treated like untrusted requests. Those 3, and here's what I'm going to do, is I'm going to give them a script to follow. I'm going to say, okay, we have my travel website, so here's what I want you to do. I want you to browse all the travel options for all the airlines. Then I want you to create a new user account. I want you to modify your user account. I want you to book some travel, so forth and so on. I'm going to give them a script that walks them through every aspect of my web application. So they're hitting every file type. They're hitting every URL, every form, every field, and so forth. And watch what happens when the first user accesses that transfer .asp file. We generate a learning entry for .asp, and it goes immediately to 100%. We generate a learning entry for transfer.asp URL. It goes immediately to 100%. Why? Because it came from a trusted source. I trust that user. And by the way, if we were in automatic mode, we just hit 100%, that's going to get added to my security policy immediately. So with that. And these other users continue to use all the aspects of my web application. And as they do, we go right to 100% for each of these file types, each of these URLs, all the parameters, anything we have that we're learning. Quick way to do the policy building. But here's what we have to be careful of. I know Leeway. He's a little shiesty, right?
Totally.
And you're going to sit down here and say, hey, Shadon, look, we can also do SQL injection. I can also access files that I shouldn't access. Watch this. php.ini. Oh, there's the web page. But guess what we just did? We just now took ini to 100%. And if we're in automatic mode, he just added ini as a valid file type, and the URL is a valid file type. So while we're getting requests and building the policy from our trusted users, they should be doing nothing wrong. If he showed them how to do a SQL injection attack, a signature he just triggered is now being added as an allowed signature because a trusted user did it. So when I'm using trusted requests to build my security policy, I can build my security policy much faster. Much faster. And as a reminder, we can use a combination of trusted and untrusted. But I'm going to put more of my emphasis on my trusted requests. So I can quickly create file type whitelist, URL whitelist, and parameter whitelists. That's pretty good. That's pretty cool. Now, how do I designate these IP addresses? You can do it in 2 times. You can either do it when you create the policy or after the fact. I forgot to add some IP addresses. I'll go do that later. While you're, you know what? I'm sorry. I'm jumping ahead. So in the last exercise, I had you adjust the policy building speed. I wanted you to generate those learning scores at a higher rate so that we didn't have to sit here for 6 hours in this exercise so you could get learning score increases. So I had you learn faster. Guess what? We can do the same thing with our trusted users. Why waste time? All of that was done, as you saw in your last exercise, in the learning and blocking settings page down at the bottom. Down here, we've got all of our policy building. This is some magic stuff in here. Magic stuff in that little drop down, which you do have to make sure you're viewing. Now, there are 3 ways we can adjust speed. These 3. And I'm only right now going to focus on the first section, the loosen policy. I'm going to open that up. The loosen policy section is just simply what generates learning score in an initial learning entry in the learning list, and how fast that learning score goes up. That's what the loosen policy values are for. Notice we have different settings for untrusted users versus trusted users. I told you earlier, we're going to focus on the trusted, by the way, or the untrusted. I told you earlier that we can customize how many unique sessions we need to affect the learning score entry. How long somebody has to wait, one individual host, how long they need to wait before another request from them affects a learning score entry that they've already affected. That's all done right here. It's done in those 3 settings. With this particular default setting for, I believe this was from the fundamental, this might have been rapid deployment too, I don't quite remember. with these settings here, we need to have 20 unique requests for an entry. Let's say PHP. 20 unique requests from 20 separate sources, 20 totally separate sources within a 1 hour period of time. And what that means is, if we get a request for PHP, and another request for PHP, and another one, and another one, we're now at 59 minutes. We've only had 19 requests for PHP. The next request for PHP comes in 3 minutes from now. That's over an hour. All those first 19 requests are kind of thrown away. They're irrelevant. We need to have 20 requests within a 1 hour period of time to first create a learning score entry to begin with, and then once the learning suggestion is in the list, it takes 20 more requests from 20 other unique sources within a 1 hour period to increase the learning score.
Just by one. By one.
One segment. The segment you will see sometimes goes faster than others. That depends upon some other factors I won't go into. It might go up by 5% increments. It might go up by 10% increments. Again, any entry I'm referring to could be a file type, it could be a URL, it could be a parameter, it could be any other number of things. Anything that has that learn checkbox on the learning and blocking settings page. The learn checkbox that we saw earlier. Now, again, the learning score is only going to go up if we get 20 more unique requests within that 1 hour threshold. And one entry, one host, cannot affect the learning score for that entry, PHP, but once every 7 days. That's what those three values mean. Notice, for my trusted traffic, the default here only takes one request to affect the learning score, to create a learning entry and affect the learning score. That's the default. I can't lower it any more than that. Can't make it less than one. All these settings are customizable. We can slow down learning, we can speed up learning if we choose to. I do like to point this out because I've been using ASM for a long time and I never really read this text. What this is saying to us is that if a request is deemed non-malicious, it actually lowers these requirements just a little bit. In other words, if it does not trigger any kind of a violation at all, it'll actually give it a little bit more weight to the learning speed. But if it does trigger a violation, it actually slows it down. It actually uses more stringent values than we have here. That's just sort of an FYI. You won't really see that in any way other than just knowing that's the case. So here's how we can modify those settings. First, I can just use one of three default values: fast, medium, slow. I can affect the learning score in that manner. What does that do? Well, I'll show you. Fast. Here are the default settings for fast. Now, I only need 10 unique requests, not 20. 10 unique requests within a 30-minute period of time. As long as I get 10 requests in 30 minutes, I'm going to create a learning entry or up the learning score. That means the learning score can go up once every 30 minutes, but no more than once every 30 minutes. The learning score cannot go up more than once every 30 minutes. And it will only go up if we hit that threshold of 10 users within that 30-minute period of time. Still, by default, a single host entry, a single source, can only affect an entry once every 7 days. This is what we just saw a few moments ago, the median. 20 sources over an hour. Slow says that we need to have 50 unique requests for an entry within a 1 hour period of time. And both of these, the learning score cannot go up, but more than once an hour. And it will only go up if we meet that threshold of, in this case, 50 users within that hour period. Still knowing that one source can affect the learning score, but more than once every 7 days. These are not the only 3 options we have. We can make them whatever we want by choosing the custom option. In this example, I am now requiring 100 unique requests within a 4-hour window of time. The learning score can only go up no more than once every 4 hours, and only if we hit 100 users in that 4 hours. And one source can't affect the learning score more than once every 14 days. With these settings, am I going to speed up policy building, or am I going to slow down policy building? I'm going to be slowing it down. It's going to build much slower. The learning scores are going to go up very slow. With this example, I'm only requiring 5 unique sources over a 15-minute period of time. As long as I get 5 unique requests, we can generate a learning score entry, and the learning score can go up every 15 minutes, as long as we have 5 unique requests. And one source can affect the learning score every 2 days. So is that going to speed up or slow down learning? That's going to speed it up. We're going to see learning scores going up much faster. Notice that regardless of whether I use fast or slow, the values are the same for trusted traffic, because again, I can't go into lower than 1. It's the least number of requests I can expect from somebody. So as long as I get 1 request in a period of no time, in other words, the very first request, it's going to affect the learning score, create a learning entry, or affect the learning score. But bearing in mind, we still have to wait 7 days from that host before they can affect the learning score again. So I've got these 3 users, and I want them to build my policy fast. So I say, go through and use the whole web application. They use all the URLs, all the file types, all the parameters. So we're going to actually build our whitelist very fast. You know why? Because I'm in automatic mode. I'm in automatic mode. So as soon as they request something, it hits 100%, gets added to my whitelist. Boom. I've created all of these entries. That sounds like I'm done. Maybe that sounds like all I need. But in the next lesson, we're going to talk about the fact that there's actually more to it than just creating the PHP file type. There's actually more to it. I actually want to start defining aspects about PHP. We're going to talk about this in the next lesson. But unfortunately, these 3 users, they cannot affect that setting, these settings, but waiting 7 days. So I'm like, okay, you guys can all leave and come back a week from now and make another request. And then leave and come back a week from now and make another request. Anybody have any other suggestions of what I could do to not make them wait that long?
Sure, turn down the days.
I could lower that number of days, that's right. I could make it 2 days. And I say, okay, leave and come back 2 days from now and make another request. Or I could make it 1 day. Or I could make it a half a day. I can actually lower that to the lowest possible value. Anybody know what the lowest possible value is?
1 second.
1
second.
The lowest possible value we can make that is 0.0001 days. It's the lowest value that field will accept. Anybody know how long 0.0001 days is? It's somewhere between 8 and 9 seconds. So if I lower that to 0.001 days, I can now say, all right, generate your first requests And now you can generate your second request, but guess what? They can't just do it from the same browser window. They have to be seen as a new source from a new session in that period of time, 9 seconds, and it's not going to be looked at as a new session if they just use the same browser window. So what is our solution for that? I'm sorry? How do I?
Incognito.
Private window. Every time they can just close it, open a new private window, go through all the steps again. Access this page, fill in this form, fill in this, and now they're going to be seen as new, fresh requests. Close it, wait another 9 seconds, and they can do it again. That's what you guys are going to be doing in your last exercise. So I'm going to come back to that in just a few slides. So now let's talk about how do I add these trusted IP addresses. You can do it when you're creating the policy. It's one of the options down here. I can now just add things like IP ranges, network address, or just static IP addresses, the people that I've designated.
Can I use IPv6 there?
I believe so, but I've never tried, but I believe so. You'll have to try it.
Okay.
See if it accepts it. As a reminder, this is only affecting trusted traffic policy building. That's it. Notice we can also change the learning speed here from slow to medium fast. But I'll remind you that regardless of which of those settings I choose, fast or slow, the trusted traffic scores don't change at all. They're going to be the same. So the reason I'm saying that is because these settings here are only affecting untrusted requests. They don't have any effect on trusted requests. Not everybody gets that. But after the fact, you're like, oh shoot, I forgot to add those IP addresses. Or I need to remove one of those IP addresses that I added on accident. We can do that on your IP exceptions page. This page lets us set up IP addresses that do a variety of things. For example, allowing or removing from logging. Ignore this IP address from logging. Blocking this IP address using IP. There's a lot of different things we can do with these IP addresses on this page. What we're going to do is click on Create. I'm going to put in, these are all the things you can do, by the way, with IP addresses. But what we're going to do is put in that new IP address that we wanted, that we forgot to include, and choose Policy Builder Trusted IP. That will now become a trusted IP for that security policy. Of course, we could remove one too if I wanted to remove an IP address. Once I save and once I apply the policy, now all the requests from that IP address will be looked at as trusted requests. Now we're going to take this whole concept and go further with it in the next lesson. I want you now to just identify these two concepts, manual and automatic policy building, using either trusted or untrusted requests. They're all interchangeable. So you're going to be starting with a fresh security policy. You're going to use manual policy building with untrusted requests only and generate some traffic and view the results. You're then going to add a trusted IP address for your workstation. And you're going to generate some more traffic and hopefully see some different results. You're then going to delete that security policy and create a brand new policy, a second policy, this one using automatic policy building and trusted requests right from the get-go. Generate some traffic and you should see a policy that's really getting built fast. And that's going to be the policy for your last exercise. So don't delete your policy at the end of exercise 3.
So with automatic policy building it like this, these results are added automatically to the whitelist. At what point does blocking come into play for items that are.
That's such a good question, and we are going to totally cover that in the last lesson. I mean, that is the most important part of the last lesson to me, so you're going to see that. It's an excellent question, though, and customers are going to ask that too.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
Any other last questions? All right, so 45 minutes I give you, so let's take until about 3:30. I want to give you plenty of time, but try to sneak a break in there as well, bio break. At around 3:30, that should give us plenty of time to cover everything by the end of the day.